carrying with her a suffocating sense that every wall was whispering an invisible indictment. Investigations swirled around her like a tightening net, drawn together by hidden handshakes, figures evaporating from the books, security footage cut at strange intervals, and polite smiles in the lobby where every nod concealed the cold metallic tang of a dagger kept under the table. As she descended the stone steps, her shoulder brushed against that of a woman. Just a light touch, yet enough to awaken an old intuition, like a perfume lingering from years ago, like the sound of footsteps that paused too long outside a child's bedroom on sleepless nights, like the silent break in an articulate song suddenly cracking open into a sigh no one knew the origin of. The woman turned, her eyes the gray of impending rain, her cheekbones high, her nose straight, her face bearing fine, time-worn marks like scratches on a mirror that refused to break. What passed between them was not a string of words, but the weight of silence, the taut pull between air and memory, the pulse skimming against the ribcage like a wild bird striking its cage, leaving the air cold as a seam whose stitches had just been ripped. Barbara, a name once etched in stone, once sung in a husky voice in Articulate's rehearsal room, once told as a cruel fairy tale, now standing here, alive, like a question someone had deliberately left unanswered for years. Barbara's return was not merely a plot twist. It was a drill bit driven into the ceiling of what had seemed stable, shaking down the dust of oaths, defiance, and knots Leslie had tightened around her life to keep from hearing the moans of the past. She had once learned to live with the absence shaped like a mother, to tuck that emptiness into its own drawer, cover it with a cloth, and lock it away with work, with decisions as cold as a winter night, with sternness toward herself and toward anyone who dared seek softness in her eyes. But Barbara, carrying the scent of antiseptic and the remnants of a long escape, stood tall in that doorway as though intent on reclaiming the abandoned room in Leslie's chest, as though playing dead had been a prolonged rehearsal for this entrance, the moment when everything in Fairmont Crest would have to choose a side, when secrets would no longer fit in the shadows. Sharp, pin-like questions swarmed Leslie's mind. Why vanish? From whom? At what cost? Who staged the funeral? Who made the anonymous calls guiding disastrous choices? Who cleaned the scene of a disappearance without footprints? And whether the purpose of returning now was a lifeline for maternal redemption or bait to unlock a cell hiding something within Fairmont Crest's crumbling walls. The basement of the story began to tremble as Articulate was dragged back into the hot glare of gossip and suspicion. Barbara's name, once lodged in the memories of fans like an unfinished refrain, became living proof of a refined web of lies. Secret rehearsals hidden behind false tour dates, unreleased recordings turned into coded messages, money wired away and back again like a shuttle spinning out of control between accounts. In Barbara's eyes, Leslie saw a composure ill-suited to someone freshly risen from the grave, the disciplined calm of one who has lived long enough in darkness to know that everything has its price, even life. Fragments of recollection began to assemble into an image more dangerous than any official suspect. An old, mildewed network linking the music studio of years past to Fairmont Crest's parties. Clipped phone calls to invitations with no time printed. Harmless-seeming art grants to a chain of laundering operations for stories no one wanted told. Barbara carried the markings of a survivor, not a mere victim and certainly not a saint, maintaining a deliberate distance from everyone, even Leslie, as if the choice of when to untie the knot could determine not only the fate of mother and daughter, but the fate of an entire community breathing shallowly beneath its glossy veneer. Leslie now faced a brutal moral equation. Rebuild the burned bridge with the rotted planks of old trust, or burn the remaining planks to illuminate the figure who had struck the match. The first cost of either path was Eva, the child Leslie cherished as her own redemption. Her chance to make one right choice among a chain of wrong ones now stood at the center of whispers growing louder around Fairmont Crest. Questions clung to Eva's name like raindrops to a windshield at night. Was she truly Leslie's biological daughter? Why was she raised behind such heavy curtains? Who had been cut out of the story from the start, and who now demanded their role back? Leslie knew any explanation could be turned into a confession if told in the wrong setting. That hesitation gave doubt time to root into prejudice. That maternal love was the most easily snapped string when overstretched, and that Barbara, with her pre-storm stillness, might one day become the place Eva turned, not because of confirmed blood ties, but because of answers Leslie was not yet ready to give. In the labyrinth's deepest coil, the motive for Barbara's disappearance took the shape of a betrayal not wholly tied to music. Contracts annotated in green ink, insurance policies triggered in odd ways, a staged on-stage accident as a tearful farewell, but evidence fragments kept drifting off course as if invisible hands were quietly replacing them to distort the picture. Meanwhile, new alliances in Fairmont Crest spread like an oil slick, former rivals finding common cause under investigation, once marginal faces suddenly gaining decisive voices, and every move Leslie made had to be weighed between immediate advantage and long-term fallout, between shielding Eva from rumors' violence and prying open a lid-hiding clause inside. Barbara sought neither forgiveness nor conventional justice. She suggested, with calculated presence, with precisely placed signs, with riddles even the sharpest minds feared solving wrongly. Each time Leslie thought she'd grasped a thread, it split. One end leading to an articulate reunion where audience seats were shifted like chess pieces, the other into the cold numbers of a financial report where a patron's familiar signature had become a trembling stroke, leaving the question of whether it shook from age or fear. Tension peaked when a small but symbolic disruption struck a closed meeting. Chandelier lights flickering like ragged breathing, a side door jammed then swinging open to reveal a narrow hall down to the archive room, whose custodial care had been neglected for years. Boxes were stacked like geological strata, and guided by an unnameable instinct, Leslie went straight to a thinner one than the rest, its exterior labeled with an incomplete name ending in a dash. Inside were rehearsal photos of Articulate, postcards sent without reply, and a bank statement mismatched to the public tour schedule. No nails sealed it, no lock barred it, only someone's intention that this box would one day be opened by someone like Leslie, as though the entire game had been scripted for this moment. For her to realize secrets had never truly belonged to her alone, and that Barbara had brought not only questions but a cord that, if pulled too hard, could drop the whole Fairmont Crest stage into darkness. From here, Leslie had to seriously map two futures, one of repair, accepting that motherhood could be rebuilt on ruins if both were willing to name each loosened brick, and one of exposure, choosing to overturn everything, losing the irretrievable in exchange for transparency enough for Eva to walk without bowing under a stain left by others. Both maps placed Barbara at the center, both guidepost and obstacle, both survivor in need of shelter and reminder that shelter can be a trap. In the first scenario, the three would find a shared language not born of sentimentality but of joint responsibility for cleaning the aftermath of years of silence. In the second, Leslie would make herself a target to ensure Eva was not made complicit in crimes she never committed, forcing Barbara to answer publicly for choices long hidden, no longer shielded by the noble gloss of sacrifice. Fairmont Crest, with its trimmed lawns and heavy gates, waited to see which door Leslie would choose, but waiting rotted all good things. So she resolved to set her own rules, not avoiding, not surrendering, observing Barbara as a variable that could change the equation, protecting Eva as a constant that could not be harmed further. She began stitching timelines together, laying Barbara's fragments beside official evidence, finding strange, exact overlaps, like echoes from adjoining rooms, like two versions of the same story told by two people both trying to save something unnamed. Every step Leslie took now forced those around her to reveal their true positions. Sweet smiles turning bitter, toasts becoming perfunctory, invitations shifting into subpoenas, even the puppet masters behind the curtains showing their rusted joints. When rain fell over Fairmont Crest, turning its clean streets into slick silver ribbons, Leslie saw the refined cruelty of fate, that it never offered a perfect answer, only choices that each led to a different kind of trial. Barbara had returned not as a miracle of correction but as a mirror for all the times one stayed silent instead of speaking, left instead of remaining, built monuments where dismantling was needed. And in that mirror Leslie saw herself, saw Eva, saw the faces who once cheered before articulate stage, understanding that the next chapter would decide not just one relationship, but whether Fairmont Crest would keep living on ivy-covered walls and retold stories, or grow up by naming what had been done is being done and will be done. In the rain, as church bells rang like a countdown clock for decisions that could not wait, Leslie stepped across a new threshold, her hand not touching Barbara's, yet the distance no longer a moat, only an unnamed bridge that, whichever way it was crossed, would take them all beyond the safety of lies. Leslie entered the coming days feeling as though she were being forced to walk a taut rope between two high towers, the abyss below filled with echoes of memories she had tried to lock away. Barbara's return was like a sudden gust shaking that rope, forcing Leslie to balance between the emotions screaming inside her. She did not only see the mother she had long lost standing before her, but also in those eyes a chain of questions she was not sure she had the courage to answer. Old wounds she thought had healed began to bleed, not only because of what Barbara had done, but because Leslie knew her presence would drag up things she had buried deeper than the pain of losing a mother. And alongside their story stood Eva, the child Leslie had protected, nurtured, and loved as her own, though the full truth of that relationship had never been spoken. For years Leslie had kept Eva at the center of her life, both as penance for the past and as a shield against being consumed by old secrets. But now, with Barbara's return, those safety lines were fraying. The whispered rumors in Fairmont Crest, the watchful eyes of former friends, and the unusually long silences in Eva's gaze, all were needles pressing at the fragile skin Leslie had wrapped around their life. The question of whether Eva was truly her biological daughter had become impossible to avoid. If the truth emerged, would Eva still stand by her, or see it as the greatest betrayal of her life? Leslie knew Eva was old enough to sense what was wrong, smart enough to notice when a story was missing pieces. Silence had once been a form of protection, but now it was becoming an abyss between them. Speaking risked shattering unconditional trust. Staying quiet meant letting someone else, Barbara, or an unseen power in the shadows, control the narrative. And Leslie understood that once the truth was told by another, it would be reshaped into the sharpest weapon. Inside her raged a private war. One half wanted revenge, to expose all Barbara's hidden acts, to return every wound with undeniable truths. The other half yearned to rebuild, to believe there was still a chance to make something between them, even on a foundation long rotted. This tug-of-war made every step heavy, as though she carried the weight of both past and future on her shoulders. If Eva's origins were tied to Barbara, it would not only devastate Leslie but could destroy the bond between mother and daughter. Eva might feel her life had been scripted, her mother's love a curtain hiding painful truths. In the worst case, she would turn away, not from hatred, but to find herself free from the shadow of lies she had never known she lived under. For Leslie, time was running out. Choosing between revenge and forgiveness would not only shape her own fate, but decide whether Eva could grow without inheriting the scars of the previous generation. A tie that gave her reason to exist amid chaos and untouchable secrets. To outsiders, Eva was Leslie's flesh and blood, the perfect image of motherhood, unshakable. Such a truth would not only change how Eva saw her mother but redraw the map of everyone involved. A harsher theory whispered that Eva and Kat were in fact twins, separated deliberately by Leslie, who took Eva and let Kat vanish from the family picture. If proven, Leslie would face not just Eva but the entire Fairmont Crest community, where betrayed trust ignites fierce. Discovering the truth would be a turning point. If she learned Leslie had lied about her origins, the shock and pain would be immediate, but what followed would define everything. She might leave Leslie to reclaim her independence and self-respect, or set out on a dangerous search for answers. That journey could pull her into the whirlpool of secrets Leslie had risked everything to guard, where every new clue unlocked another layer of betrayal and tangled connections between past and present. Leslie understood that once the secret surfaced, she could not control Eva's reaction. Any explanation would be suspect, any protective act seen as coercion. In that moment, Leslie would have to make the hardest choice. Let Eva go to choose her own path or try to hold on, knowing it might push her further away. For Eva, the truth would be more than an answer. It would be the key to a world where she must protect herself, perhaps by finding lost family, or by confronting Barbara to uncover the final secret. Whatever she chose, she would no longer be the girl standing in Leslie's shadow. She would be the central figure in a story she never realized she had been part of since birth.